Let's focus on what may or may not happen regarding schools, certainly in England then. Dr. Mary Bousted is the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union. Joins us now. Hello.
Hello.
What do you make of today's announcement by Boris Johnson that March the 8th is now the first possible date to reopen?
Well, we all want a roadmap for schools to be reopened. My members who are teachers they much prefer teaching in person and mixing with the children. And we know that children learn better, much better when they're in school. But we have to have a safe school reopening. And I think that Boris Johnson made a mistake today by giving a date which he doesn't know whether he will be able to achieve it. Because I think parents and pupils will focus on the date. And actually what Boris Johnson was doing around that date was saying if. And I think that is those are very big ifs.
So what should he have said?
He should have said, this is a roadmap for school reopening. This is what we're going to be looking at. We need to see hospitalisation down, which he did say. We need to see the vaccine working, but we also need to see the R rate down, because currently we've got over 1 million people in this country infected with COVID, and the rate's going down very slowly. Yeah. So we would be reopening schools where the situation is much worse than it was in September when we reopened it, or indeed in March when we closed schools last year.
He could be forgiven if he was listening to you there saying he can't win, really, because he had all the other stuff you just said, what he should said, he has said. He's put all the caveats in. What, in fact, he would argue he's done today is just say, well, look, it ain't going to happen on the 15th of February. Everyone was looking towards that date because that's when the top 4 priority groups will be vaccinated. He has said to parents today, look, I'm sorry, but the homeschooling march has got to go on for another few weeks. Now, what's irresponsible about that?
I didn't call him irresponsible. I said I thought it was a mistake. And I do think it's a mistake, because if he doesn't make the 8th of March, and remember, he wasn't saying that all schools will go and all children will go back on the 8th of March. He will look to commence reopening schools. And I think there are 2 issues there. I think parents will hear 8th of March schools will be open, and that's when my child will go back. And I think that is, there's big question marks about that. And I would think it would have been better for him to be clearer about that, because we want schools to be open. But what we don't want is this stop-start of schools opening and then closing. That's the worst thing for parents. That's the worst thing for pupils.
Yeah, he said, though, hasn't he? He doesn't want a repeat of what happened last time. He won't reopen.
And we absolutely agree with him on that.
So the notion you're worried. I think I can sense from what you're saying. You're worried about patients being over-optimistic. Are you worried about the pressure they may begin to put on schools to reopen at the 8th of March then?
Well, I have trust in the science, actually, and I think that the scientists have largely done a good job. And I understand the review date will be on the 15th of February, and they'll announce the review on the 22nd of February. My worry about that is the 15th of February is less than 3 weeks. Well, less than 3 weeks away. I don't know if the metric, if the evidence will be clear enough by then. I hope it will be. But what I want to go on to say is that last term, schools were not COVID secure. They weren't safe enough. So what we've got to do now, and this is my key message, what we've got to do now with government is work with them to put measures in place that will enable pupils to go back and staff to go back and feel more confident that, particularly the adults in schools, that they aren't going to get COVID. And so we need to relook at the safety measures, and in particular, relook at the issue of social distancing in secondary schools, because our evidence is that year group bubbles of 180 pupils mixing together, many of them having gone through puberty, they become major sites of transmission of the virus. Yes. And we have to look at that again.
That's interesting. That gets me on to what Jonathan Van Tam said today. Did you hear the government press conference, by the way?
No, I didn't. I'm afraid I've been doing other media work, so I'm afraid I don't. Yeah.
All right. I'll give you the bullet points of what he had to say, because he was asked specifically about transmission in schools. He said, the evidence seems to show, as you've indicated there, that the older the child gets, the higher the propensity to transmit COVID. He said it's not clear that teachers would catch COVID from children. That evidence is not there yet. They could have caught it outside of school. There is evidence that there is no increased mortality for teachers as far as COVID is concerned. So, do you accept all that? That would argue, would it not, that certainly primary schools could scientifically appear to be safer?
I think there is less transmission in primary schools, the science shows that, and less transmission from pupils to adults in primary schools. There's not none, but there's less. I think for secondary schools, the science is a lot more murky. Now, the data which said teachers don't die, that data was taken largely when schools were closed, from March to September, because the data is from March to December, but from March to September schools were closed. So I think that there is some question around that. The issue around whether teachers catch it, we've done some work on that, and also an independent think tank, the Education Policy Institute, has done some work on that, and Education Data Lab. And all three of us conclude that actually teachers are nearly twice as likely as the general working age population to catch COVID, and support staff 3 times more likely. Now, you could say, as somebody said to me last week, oh, well, you don't know whether teachers got it in school. But that is the common denominator. And if you are saying, well, school's not a factor, what you're really saying is teachers live twice as risky lives. And I just don't believe that. So I do think infection rates, particularly in secondary schools, are really problematic. And we have to do more to keep schools COVID secure.
Just a final thought. Sir Keir Starmer said today, vaccinate all teachers during half term. Would you accept that? That would essentially meaning teachers being bumped up the priority list. Would you accept that?
Yeah, we have asked. We do think that teachers should be, vaccinated, but we are a bit unsure that you simply bump teachers and support staff up the list, because you do want to vaccinate the most, the people at most risk of dying from the virus first. And there is, I've just listened to the report just before I came on about the row about the vaccine. And the other thing I would say about that is, yes, it is a priority for school staff to be vaccinated, because we do think they're at increased risk, but that won't stop transmission from school children into the community. Right. And that's another issue.
But Keir Starmer's idea is a non-starter as far as you're concerned, as far as prioritising teachers.
No, I don't think it's a non-starter, but I think it's complex and it needs to be looked at very thoroughly.
All right, Mary Bousted, thank you.